Hello and welcome to the EchoChamber podcast. My name is Tony Groves and today we're acknowledging the elephant in the room. As always, I'm joined by my co-host and the man who just, Martin, honest to God, I'm sick of the sight of you. I really am. We were at Pride yesterday, lads, and I'd say I was there about 7 minutes and he ditched me the first celebrity he saw and he just left me. I rang him and he was standing in Smithfield with a feather boa around him.
That's true too.
And all I had was a Burger King Whopper for company. But much more importantly, we're delighted to be joined in the Tortoise Shack by Parliamentary Assistant to MEP Luke Ming Flanagan, writer, author of some, and this guy's written books about GAA that actually everybody should be going out to have a look at, because when it comes to this, he's not known for this now, but a previous generation, this guy wrote for everybody, okay? And unfortunately, he's a proud Corkonian. Tireless campaigner, Diarmuid O'Flynn. Diarmuid, thank you so much for coming onto the podcast.
It's my privilege.
Yeah.
I've been looking forward to this.
Thanks very much for coming on. As I was telling you earlier, I rang my mom and I said that you were coming on. She goes, "Oh God, I love Diarmuid. I wish he was president." So, and that's true. And that's people have great amount of respect for you. So we're delighted to have you on here. Delighted.
Yeah. So thank you very much, Martin. But I've said this many times. It's the personalities to me don't means absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
This is, to me, is just a campaign that we've taken up Lone Valley here, and it's a campaign on behalf of the people of Ireland. And again, I've said to people, we've had a lot of praise. We've had a lot of people saying, "Oh, you've achieved this, that, the other." We've achieved nothing. And until such time as we get actual debt right down for Ireland, we've achieved, in my mind, we've achieved nothing. That's what this whole thing is about.
Well, it's not even okay. Taking that and saying to you, allowing you to be slightly dismissive of what's been done. I'm not one to disagree with you immediately. Only this week you were in with the Finance Committee.
Mm-hmm.
You sat in front of them, and we let's get back to how we arrived here. We have a thing called the promissory notes.
Mm-hmm.
And the promissory notes, have literally, if you want to put it in economic terms, I think they lumped 2% of the EU population with 42% of the EU's total bank bailout.
Well, I'd have to address that as well, because there's a bit of a misunderstanding around that.
Yeah.
Like that's a Eurostat figure, which, well, as we all know, is an official Eurostat. I mean, that's where the stats come from. But it only gives a snapshot of the picture, because what that is, that's the amount that was drawn down from the Euro funds, the loans from the Euro funds. But there are a lot of banks that were bailed out by a lot of countries that are not factored in that at all. So to say that, that we were lumped with 42% of the total bank bailout for Europe, that's probably stretching it a bit.
Okay.
Like, just for example, Defke Bank in Germany, the bullet that we dodged,
yes.
And Sugarman, he has chapter and verse on it. But like that, I think it's up to 125 or 30 billion that cost the German public.
And they were operating in the IFSC.
They were, so
we dodged that bullet by a couple of weeks.
Exactly, but like that doesn't factor in that bailout thing. So like that, one thing we do like to do is stick to what we know and the facts that we know. And what we don't know, we've no problem saying we don't understand that, we don't know. We're not, the question was asked at that finance meeting, what qualifications basically do I have to speak, with any authority on this? And none from the point of view of being an economist or an accountant, but like, you don't have to be to know what's happened here. So just the promissory notes that you were talking about, like, it's a very, very complex subject in its entirety, and when you go into the detail of it, it's very, very complex. The actual notes, what happened, how they're structured, how the legality of them, the illegality of them, because there was an entire Supreme Court case about that. But what we're talking about here is the fact that right now, in this country, we are destroying billions, and that over the last 4 years we've destroyed 10.5 billion. That was borrowed by our National Treasury Management Agency. That was real money that they had in their kitty, that they could have used, for to address any of the crises that we're suffering at the moment. And instead they've chosen to give the money to the central bank, which then destroys it. So that's, that's just, that to me is one of the major problems that we have in this country at the moment, that this promissory notes, which are complex, but the actual, when you break it down, it's very, very simple to understand it. That we are borrowing money right now and destroying it. Our central bank is destroying it on the basis of these promissory notes that were written by Brian Lennon in 2009, 2010.
You mentioned the legality of the prom notes, because I know Joan Collins took a case and fought that. We spoke with Joan a few months back, and I know the Michael Noonan had his own take on the legality of it.
He did. I mean, like what had happened. Maybe if I just give an overview, of what had happened, like that. Coming into 2009, 2010, it was patently obvious that the Irish banks were in serious trouble, all of them. And like we'd had the blanket bank guarantee in 2008. That blanket bank guarantee was given on the basis of utterly false information by the banks, all the banks. And what they were doing, they were using, and this is where it gets a little bit complex, but they used a law that was enacted here in Ireland in 2001, and then an amendment to that in 2007, the Asset Securities law in 2001.
They used an interpretation of a law.
Well, no, they used the actual law. But in this law, they were enabled to use historic valuations of the mortgages. So we say the mortgage, when you took out the mortgage, when the mortgages were given, up to 2007, we say, some of those would have been way, way, way overpriced. I mean, the mortgages were way overvalued. But because they knew that the property market had collapsed, they used this law. And this was deliberate. They used the law to disguise the true situation on their bank balance, on their balance sheets. And this goes against the fundamental law of accountancy and of reporting and auditing, which states specifically you have to give a true and fair value of the situation right then. Not a kind of based on a situation that had prevailed 2 years previously where that property had now collapsed. You were absolutely by the law. So what you had here was standards meeting the law. And the law always prevails. And the law in this instance, they broke the law. They deliberately, knowingly broke the law. This wasn't an accident. They deliberately, knowingly broke the law by not giving a true and fair value of what was on their books. And on the basis of those valuations, they got the blanket bank guarantee. That was the first thing. That was 2008. But then through 2009 and 10, while that guarantee was in force, they again abused it to apply to the liquidity fund that the ECB had created in response to it was an emergency fund that's what it was called, the Emergency Liquidity Assistance Fund. And it specifically stated it was only for banks that were suffering temporary liquidity problems.
Yes.
And again specifically stated not to be used for banks that were insolvent.
Yeah.
So the Irish banks again clearly broke the law here in the way that this fund was used, the Emergency Liquidity Assistance Fund was used. But now some of that money was created by way of promissory notes, 31 billion euro by way of promissory notes, 25.5 billion for Anglo, which was probably the most toxic of all the banks, and 5.5 billion for INBS, Irish National Building Society. It wasn't all done in one go. It was given, there were a number of promissory notes, but the promissory note was actually basically just a note by the finance minister to the central bank stating, these banks are applying for, and it wasn't just those, there were other banks as well, they're applying for assistance from the Emergency Liquidity Assistance Fund. And we don't want the central bank to suffer any loss for it, so we'll cover it. If there's any damage later on, we'll cover that. But again, it was being applied for under false pretense.
Yeah.
The banks were not, they were insolvent.
The banks were auditing themselves. Well, they had their auditors and they were reporting themselves that they were effectively solvent, but they were basing it on
historic valuations,
asset classes that no longer had the value that they were actually basing it off. But there's a trick in it. There's a trick in this insofar as how they chose to interpret. I can't think of the actual law number or whatever it is, the accounting thing, but it was very, very widely known now that we look at it now and we think about it in hindsight that it was an accountancy
I think it was IES 39.
IES 39, that's her. And if you decide to interpret it one way, they go, oh, well, they behaved in a proper fashion, but it's clearly not.
Yeah.
Even I said this to Martin the other day, I said everybody in financial services once a year has to do a course on ethics every year. Mm-hmm. And I'm sorry, but that would run contrary to some of the interpretations of certain laws that were breached in that period.
Well, Noonan was unrepentant about this with Pat Kenny, I believe. He was on Pat Kenny. He was unrepentant about this.
Well, you see, what was happening originally was, like the government was backing this thing, and then the ECB knew, the government knew, I think they all knew at that stage that like these monies were never going to be repaid by either Anglo or INBS. So basically when they went under, the ECB called in the notes, 31 billion euro. And this is where it becomes like, people have to understand, the money was created in 2009, 2010. So it was actually out in the system already. And it made no difference to the system, to the value of the money or anything else. So taking it back out of circulation, which is now what they have to do, like, only affects Ireland. And it affects us negatively in the fact that our balance sheet is majorly affected when we take this money out. But there was an original schedule of destruction, which involved Minister Noonan as the Minister for Finance, borrowing 3.1 billion euro every year and destroying it every year. So this was created, I mean, we've learned about this in 2012, and this created, like, there was an outcry over this, because the country was in a really, really bad situation in 2012, and the idea that a minister was borrowing 3.1 billion euro and destroying it, and was going to do this every year, and take this in money and just absolutely, and going to destroy it, like that there was a negative backlash to that. So Noonan in 2012, or I think it was in 2012, he came up with this scheme whereby, first of all in 2012, and then he copper fastened it in 2013, where he changed the schedule. But in doing so, he transferred purpose a very, very challengeable debt. And that's when he should have challenged it and started straight to the ECB in 2012 and said, look, we are not paying this, we're going to challenge this. And instead of doing that, because he didn't have the bottle to do that, he betrayed the country. And he made things easier for himself by rescheduling it so that future generations would have to repay this debt. They kicked the debt down 3 decades, 4 decades. Kicked the debt down the road. Didn't get 1 cent of reduction on the debt, which did reduce the interest rates. So there's a new schedule now of destruction. And what's happening at the moment, and this is what we are trying to highlight to people, is that the only coverage of the actual promissory note debt now that's happening is that every now and again, a notice comes out. It's RTE that does it, and sometimes the Irish Times that will do this. And trying to track down how many of these notes are how much this money is being destroyed is difficult. But it'll appear as a good news item that the central bank today made 150 million euro profit on the promissory note, the IBRC promissory note debt, and which they handed to the Exchequer. And that 650 million euro went to the central bank. They declared 150 million euro of profit and gave it for a 500 million euro note.
Gave it back to the Exchequer.
To the Exchequer. What's not being reported, and this is the full story, is that 650 million euro has been borrowed by the NTMA from the markets, has been given to the central bank to purchase this 500 million euro note. The central bank then gives the 150 million euro to the Exchequer. That's the only part being reported, the 150 million euro. What happens to the 500 million euro? Never reported. That is being destroyed. And we were inside with the central bank governor, Patrick Honan, and the word he used was extinguished. So that is being taken back out of circulation. It is being destroyed. Real money that the NTMA have borrowed. So the entire 650 million euro, the 500 million euro being destroyed by the central bank, the 150 million euro that's going to the Exchequer has been borrowed from the markets at current rates, and we're paying interest on it. And eventually those bonds will mature and we'll have to pay that amount back. That happened last year on 8 occasions. 500 million euro destroyed on 8 occasions. 4 billion euro destroyed last year. Twice this year it's happened. 6 times in 2016. 4 times in 2024. So 10.5 billion euros has been destroyed in that manner over the last 4 years, and not a word about it.
Well, actually, there is a word. They announced it as a good news message.
But what we are pleading with people to try and, because, like, I mean, as an individual, I've supported all the different campaigns, the household charge, the water charges, all those different campaigns. Like we know about the waiting list now. We know of the problems that are in the hospital walls at the moment. But this is all connected, and we're trying to say to people, please join the dots in. The biggest wrong that's being done to us at the moment is the destruction of this money. Because if we had that money, €10.5 billion from the last 4 years, what could we have done with that?
That is a really good point. Right, we need to join the dots on this. And this was real money that actually existed. Money that could have been used on housing, water infrastructure, hospitals, whatever we needed. But they call it extinguishing them. I mean, it's burning money is basically what it's doing. And they're burning it at a rate of up to $4 billion a year, which is outrageous considering the problems we have in this country.
Well, our entire fiscal space for our budget, I think Pascal doesn't want to call it fiscal space anymore. He wants to get away from that terminology, but he is talking about 3.2 to 3.4 billion
and
for the year.
It's only the Irish citizen that bears this burden. There's no other citizen in Europe bearing that burden.
No, this is not happening anywhere else in Europe. It's just happening here. And the big thing about this and other things that have happened over the last 10 years, we'd say, since the crisis started. And we said this at the Finance Committee meeting. We understood that there was an emergency situation. Emergency measures were going to be taken. The systems that the ECB had set up, and which are when the euro itself was set up, the major structural elements that any country needed were missing, and they're trying to put those back in there now. So they were winging it. I mean, they were actually winging it, and a lot of the things that they were doing, they were just making it up as they went along.
Yes.
So the Prime Minister notes, they were winging it then as well. But that's now finished. I mean, that element of the crisis finished. They have a lot of these new systems in place, but we are still carrying a disproportionate burden on that whole bank crisis because we were hit so badly. I mean, we had to bail out all our banks.
Yes.
Non-systemic banks, and Anglo was a non-systemic.
Absolutely.
Every bond and every, we had to pay out every bond. And this was being done. They talk about solidarity in Europe and we were just crushed. I mean, you had the duopoly of Merkel and Sarkozy, who were basically dictating everything to us.
And Greece.
And then you had,
Greece tried to stand up to this.
Who speaks of Syriza now?
Yeah, no, and again, anybody who raises concerns about prom notes or about the state of the country, immediately you're attacked with, you'll be Greece. Yeah. You'll be Greece.
Or you're not putting on the green
Greece
jersey.
Greece is Greece, not because of finances, but because of politics.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, anybody who has read, we were following that very closely over because Syriza are in the same group that Luke is in, over at GUE and GL in the European Parliament. And we were following it very closely, and we had met Varoufakis and we'd listened to him a few times, and very, very impressive. I mean, the guy's motivations are all, top. I mean, he's a top drawer individual, but he's also a top economist. I mean, he really knows what he's talking about. So he did that, but as they were going through, I mean, they were in a very different position. We should point this out, like when they were elected, I think it was the beginning of last year, in that at that stage, when the Kenny Gilmore axis was there.
It was 3 years ago.
That was 2011. And in 2011, the ECB was in total disarray and the euro was in total disarray. So, that government had a very strong mandate and was in a very strong position to challenge the ECB and what was being done here in Ireland to say, no, we're not bailing out all our banks. No, we're not doing this. We're not destroying money in the promissory notes. And Kenny actually did go. He did go to Europe, and I think within a couple of days of the election, and he just got slapped down hard by Merkel. And since then, he spent the next 5 years trying to get back into Merkel's good books. He became the puppy dog of Europe.
That was the basis for his election. He was
mandated on the basis to renegotiate the debt.
That's right.
There was crazy statements used. I know our current Taoiseach said something about not another red cent.
Yeah.
In his earlier
going to Anglo.
Yeah,
actually the best speech that we've seen. the best speech that we saw on the whole bailout debt and the money that was made by Michael Noonan in his budget speech of 2010. And I could send it to you a copy, but like, it was brilliant. I mean, it was typical acerbic, caustic Noonan, but it was, absolutely like pointing out the injustice of
the inequalities and the injustices.
Yet, for less than 6 months later, he was doing exactly the same thing. So and we do, but like like I said, Ireland was in a stronger position. Like, and we could have, and we, even as an economy at that stage, I think we were in a much stronger position than Greece were when Syriza were elected as an economy, because Greece at that stage was a complete basket case, and the ECB at that stage had got its teeth. They had got a lot of teeth with the new weapons that they were given after the crisis. They really had teeth, and by God, did they use them. And they used them in a political sense. Because they were then, when you read Varoufakis' book, Adults in the Room, and you see exactly, I mean, this was what was done, and we played a shameful role in it. Noonan played a shameful role in it. But like, what was done was deliberately just to put down an uprising, a democratic uprising in Greece. And the economics of it were absolutely out the window. Had nothing to do with it.
There's an interesting point on the Greek model, because when they did come into power, obviously the Greek economy was already deep in recession, but they knew that they had, I think it was 120 days worth of money left to pay for teachers and doctors and nurses and all of the infrastructure that they needed.
Yeah.
And yet, within a few weeks, they were called to HQ, and they were told, we're turning you off at the end of the month.
Yeah.
And he said, no, but we have another 90 days after that. And he said, yeah, we know that, but we're turning you off at the end of the month, because the idea was they couldn't have them implementing the programme for government, which they'd actually run for election on. Then they went back to the people, won another overwhelming election, and got told, we're doubling down now. We're selling your airports, we're selling your infrastructure, we're selling, and by the way, just tell everybody it's feckless Greeks, because that's what's to come. I can already feel the Twitter lighting up, telling me, feckless Greeks, they all have swimming pools.
Yeah, well, the thing about it's the feckless and reckless Greeks and the responsible Germans. But in the presentation to the Finance Committee, like I spoke about, and quoted like how reckless Germany had been, like in the lead up to the crisis. I mean, the Germans, I think it was, I titled it The Rock of Financial Sense, but at the time of the crisis, and this was a report, and this was in Bloomberg, which wouldn't exactly be your left-wing, because it was a report in Bloomberg. And again, it was from the Bank of International Settlements, who again wouldn't exactly be quoting Marx like in their spare time. But they outline how, this was in May 2012, German banks, this is in May 2012, German banks had amassed claims of $704 billion. That's just German banks. In Greece, Ireland, Italy, Portugal and Spain. Much more than the German banks' aggregate capital. In other words, they lent more than they could afford. And when the European Union and the European Central Bank stepped in to bail out the struggling countries, they made it possible for German banks to bring that money home. And as a result, they bailed out Germany's banks, as well as the German taxpayers who might otherwise have had to support those banks if those loans weren't repaid. So unlike much of the aid provided to Greece, the support to Germany's banks happened automatically as a function of the currency union structure. And this then was from, and I didn't get to quote this, but it was from a lengthy article by Michael Lewis, who wrote The Big Short.
Big Short, yes.
And the film was made in that brilliant book and brilliant film, and everybody should watch it. But this appeared in Vanity Fair, and he was talking about German bankers in Wall Street. Now, we know how bad they were here in the IFSC because of what the DEFCA bank that Johnson Sugar talked about. But this was in Wall Street. And this is what he wrote in there, that this, even as the crisis was hitting in Wall Street and people began to know what these derivatives included, they said extremely smart traders inside Wall Street investment banks devised deeply unfair, diabolically complicated bets, and then they send their sales forces out to scour the world for some idiot who will take the other side of those bets. During the boom years, a wildly disproportionate number of those idiots were in Germany. As a reporter for Bloomberg News again in Frankfurt, named Aaron Kirschfeld, put it to me, you'd talk to a New York investment bank and they'd say, no one is going to buy this crap. Oh wait, the Landesbanks will. When Morgan Stanley designed extremely complicated credit default swaps, all but certain to fail, so that their own proprietary traders could bet against them. The main buyers were German. When Goldman Sachs helped the New York hedge fund manager John Paulson design a bond to bet against, a bond that Paulson hoped would fail, the buyer on the other side was a German bank called IKB. IKB, along with another famous fool at the Wall Street poker table called Westel B, is based in Dusseldorf, which is why when you ask the smart Wall Street bond trader who was buying all this crap during the boom, you might well say simply, stupid Germans in Dusseldorf. But then you have to wonder, how stupid were those at the very top? Because the control, and there's no doubt about this, of the ECB is by Germany in the Bundesbank.
It has been since its architecture.
There was an article, and I could send you this as well, link to this, done, it was a report done by a German university, on where the money that went to Greece actually ended up.
Yes.
And I think it was about 240 billion that's involved in the two so-called bailouts of Greece. But over 90% of that ended up back
in
with
German
banks.
Yeah,
not just German banks, German and French
but
banks.
There was a huge proportion. I think it was just under 90% of money that was lent to Greece in one of the particular phases of the bailout. One of the particular phases, they literally, the money only passed through Greece on its way back to the bank's balance sheets.
Yeah.
And it was, I can't remember which portion of it was, but it was astronomical. It was literally just a vehicle of passing money around.
It was bailing out the German banks. That's what it was actually doing. That whole thing was about bailing out the German banks. And even here, even though it didn't go directly, but the loans that we got from the Troika amounted to 67.5 billion euro, 22.5 from the IMF and 45 billion from the EU funds. But our bank bailout cost was 69.7 billion euro if you include the 5.5 that they got from NAMA.
Yes.
So, I mean, this so-called, and it's the thought was a bailout for us. There were loans that were given to us on which we were paying interest, and extremely high interest rates in the beginning as well, exorbitant interest rates. But it didn't even cover what we put into our banks. And it's been sold to us as though, we were bailed, Ireland was bailed out. Ireland and Greece and Spain and Portugal bailed out the major banks of Europe. Nothing. That's what this whole entire exercise was about. And that's why at this stage, somebody has to stand up from the Irish government here and challenge this. And that's what we were doing in the Dáil committee. We were asking for a cross-party committee because we tried to stay non-partisan in the Ballyheigue group, non-political, non-partisan. We've had, strong Fine Gael supporters march with us,
Yes.
in the beginning, and we welcome everybody because this affected everybody. It didn't matter what political party you were, what social philosophy or political philosophy you had. Everybody in this country is being adversely affected and badly hit by this, especially those at the bottom, but everybody.
That's why I opened and saying we're talking about the elephant in the room, because it's the elephant in every room. If you're going to premise everything on what we're going to spend on this, what we have for that, what resource we have for this, and then we have on the flip side what they're calling now practical Pascal, and I don't want to personalise it, but he is the Minister for Finance, they're going with the moniker practical Pascal, and he's talking about debt to GDP ratio rates, and we're talking about all these things. It's all weighted on the fact that we have this noose around our necks that we carry, and we haven't even had the wherewithal to actually talk to our partners in Europe and our partners across party, even in the Dáil, and say, is there scope here to have a debt council where we sit down and we talk about it, we talk about the mechanics of it, because let's tell the truth here. We're all well and good now. We're all going to sit down in the next while. We've seen Greece and France and Germany are getting ready to plough ahead with their tax plans, with or without whether we make it a red line issue or not. It doesn't matter. They're going to plough ahead,
and they'll find a way around that as well, because they'll find a way to impose the qualified majority in there as opposed to the unanimous majority.
That seems
they'll find a way of doing it.
That they will implement it. Yes, I agree with you there, but I think there's going to be a way that they'll localize it, and it'll be too penal then for the companies that are affected to continue to use Ireland in that way.
It's not that the time is right now. It's that it's overdue. We are overdue,
yeah. And because, Martin, we're being told here that we're in recovery.
Yes.
You know,
How can we be in order?
We were told, we're told, you see, this is, I have a major problem with our media, I have to say, our mainstream media about, it was not just in the way that the promissory note thing is sorted, but the whole, we were told that Fine Gael and Noonan and Kenny and Labour especially would tell us that they had to make the tough decisions. But the tough decisions, in my view, would have been to hit the political class, to slash their own numbers and their salaries, their allowances, hit the high end earners, introduce, even on a temporary basis, a third rate of tax. I said, hit the multinational corporations, because we never asked them, can we, even for 3 or 4 years, can we put another 2%, 2% on your corporation tax?
More importantly, ask them to actually pay the 12.5%.
Even that. But these would have been the tough decisions, hit the IFSC, go in there, and clean that place out, and, take on the ECB, and instead, they took, in my view, they hit the soft targets, took the easy decisions, they hit the young, because they cut the education budget across the board, and they cut the rate for people under 25 on the old. They hit the old because they cut home health laws, and they attacked everything. They hit the sick. We know about that. The healthcare budget, frontline staff hit. Services badly affected. They hit the most vulnerable because they came after special needs. Where they made the cuts.
They crippled single parents. That was the biggest. That was the biggest driver.
Women especially.
Women especially.
Yeah. But they hit the poorest especially because they've also introduced these universal taxes. You have progressive taxes.
Yes.
But they introduced these universal taxes that it doesn't matter what your income is. You are going to be paying this.
Water was one of them. Bins is another one.
Yeah.
And now we're looking at a broadcasting charge that they're trying. These are just a way of taking money out of your pocket.
And they hit everybody. And they are completely disproportionate.
Yes.
So when people tell me that, they took they ran from the tough decisions and they hit the soft targets.
The easiest way to look at that, and I mean this is as someone who's then going to come back and speak in favour of the Troika for a second. They came in and they looked at it and they said, listen, guys, your bank regulation is a mess. Your legal system is a mess. Your judicial system is a mess. All of these structures, you need reform was their agenda.
Mm-hmm.
And then we went through the bailout process. We went and we started paying off, and then we got our sovereignty back. But we didn't do any of the reforms. We left with it, and the legal fraternity had a sigh of relief and said, look, we got out the door here on this, guys. We didn't, the idea that we can still have, you need a barrister for this and a solicitor for that. We still have this. We still have all of these things that mean we can charge, we can do this. And we left all of those structures in place, whether it be auditing, legal, accountancy, all of those things that we were told needed reform.
And they do need reform.
Oh, of course they do. But I was at the bloody Pride March. I saw the central bank march yesterday with a T-shirt that said celebrating 75 years of the central bank, and on the back they had rainbow team. And I thought to myself, 75 years of what? And you're marching in.
Well, I just got to point this out. It's two things, and it's about the legal profession that came up this week, and it's to show how archaic the legal system is. And it's just two random examples. There was a TD on the radio who said, as a legislator, he couldn't criticise the judiciary over a decision that had been made this week. Now, it's his bloody job to criticise. And the other thing was, and this is just
hang on.
Show how...
The Taoiseach got up and said, when Paul Murphy was found innocent, that just because you were found innocent didn't mean you did something wrong.
Okay.
In the Dáil, he said that.
Yes. And now, but that's what was said by a legislator, that we can't criticise the judiciary. It's your bloody job to criticise. And the second thing to show how archaic the legal system is, they had to have written permission to take their jackets off in the tea room in 30-degree weather. Now, are we living, what kind of cloud cuckoo land is our judiciary living in? It's cloud cuckoo land.
It is.
And we need to start getting as bolshy with them as we can.
But in Martin, the other thing like this, and, as I suppose we've attracted a lot of people who are in trouble because of the financial crisis. But what you learn as well about the judicial system here, I mean, I don't care what anybody says. It's a bit like the ECB being supposedly non-political. Our judicial system, I think, is political.
Yes.
And they do make their decisions based on political influence. And I think that they are being politically influenced. I mean, you talked about it, the Jobstone trial. If that wasn't politically influenced, what was? And it's black and white proof. I mean, and they're all found not guilty. And it's a bit like the Maurice McCabe incident. Like if he hadn't had his tapes,
if he hadn't recorded those conversations,
he would not be in major trouble. But if that video from the helicopter hadn't appeared in the Jobstone trial as well, they would have been in
but
trouble.
a judge told the jury to disregard what the Gardaí evidence had been given, and nothing has been said about that.
This is like that.
Well, we have. There's even worse. I mean, and I don't mean to measure these things. We shouldn't be measuring.
Yeah, shouldn't.
But there is a tribunal going on at the moment, and it is farcical. It's farcical what's happening.
Yeah,
and there is no accountability anywhere. Nobody is going to face a sanction anywhere along the line. And that's so wrong in a country that literally jumps from scandal to scandal to scandal.
Well, you have a woman in jail at the moment in Montreal because she's refusing to surrender her house.
Yes.
You have a doctor who was given 6 years, because of tax problems.
Yeah.
And this week you had serious white collar crime.
Yeah.
2 people. And you look at the sentences.
A person who has findings in a Moriarty tribunal, firm findings against him, being told he's of good character.
Yes, yes.
By the judge.
By the judge.
I mean, so you have this situation that's existing here where, it's blatant, and for anybody to deny it, that the judicial system here is independent and independent of influence, and that we have a great judicial system.
Yeah.
It is an absolute nonsense.
Can I come back and caveat that with Edmund Honohan launched Lorcan Sur's compendium book this week with all of the papers on housing and how we should tackle these things, and he's the judge who has more or less stayed a lot of repossessions in the courts by the banks on family homes purely by his own obstinance. Whereas if it wasn't for his legal judgment, we probably could have had a lot more of we have a terrible homeless crisis and emergency, but he stayed a lot of that. I know it's a small.
That's an individual.
Yes, absolutely. But I'm just calling it out.
We're looking at the system, I think, rather than the individuals within the system. The system itself doesn't work. Or doesn't work to the benefit of the Irish citizen.
No, it doesn't. This week, I met 3 people down in Cork at one meeting this week. One of those people has a court that's, he's had his Supreme Court hearing and he's awaiting judgment on that. But he could wait. We don't know how long he'll wait, and that's a very, very serious cause. And the ramifications from it are serious, depending which way the verdict comes. It's a bit like on the promissory note itself. And I was talking to a woman who's handling her own case, and believe me, these are really decent people who just found themselves wronged, and initially they trusted her. They were like myself, when they saw that they trusted entirely in all the system. I mean, I would have, without question, I would have accepted the Gardaí, the legal system, everything here. But the more you look into it, the more you see that if you're on the wrong side of it, you'll just be crushed. It's there to protect certain interests.
And itself.
And itself.
It has become this behemoth that protects itself.
Yeah. And it's, and I would never have thought that, but when you hear these things, and when you see chapter and verse on it, it's frightening, how rotten the whole thing is out there. I mean, when I started working with Luke, then we know about Gavin McCabe, Sartre McCabe, but there are others. Yeah. And that he has been informed about, that he has details of cases, and you get to read about those.
Well, we know about Jonathan Wilson. We had Gemma here. Gemma went to the EU with Luke to speak about it. Yeah. She travelled with you guys.
And I mean, it's people literally getting away with murder.
But, and I'll just, again, I'm going to caveat this. We had Gemma in here, and Gemma was bloody great. And still, to this date, our highest download figures are from Gemma. So people are interested. Even if they're not getting it in the mainstream media, they are interested. And that's a ray of hope in this, that there are people are overwhelmingly interested.
But that's probably not the biggest betrayal of all, I think, of the media, because the politicians, yes, too, but politicians, we know that there's a lot of self-interest in politicians, but the media, supposedly they're the fourth estate. They're the people who protect us from all these other excesses, and they have completely, for the main part, I said there are some great exceptions or brilliant exceptions, but I don't want to name one in case I forget others.
Yeah.
And there are several, and they're high profile, but they're battling against a tide, because I think a lot of this is happening at the official level in newspapers,
a lot of it
editorial level,
yep.
management level. That and I know from my own experience as well in journalism that there's some that you can have all kinds of control exerted in these things. You don't necessarily have to be told you can't write about this or you can't write about this.
Yeah.
But what can happen is that you're just not assigned.
Or
speaking about this for ages.
Or more importantly, is what actually happens is what we call the unseen hand of our self-censorship.
Yes.
Because what happens is, that I find particularly in the current market, as you said, because you gotta understand, journalists now could be on pay per piece. They could be on tenuous employment terms. And so they're working to a schedule, and if they want to get paid, they need to write in a certain style, some of them. That's not to say, so some of that is self-censorship, some of it is actual editorializing, and some of it is just downright bloody interference. We don't need to hide some of the fact that a lot of journal, like, you want to go out and pick up a Sunday paper today, and you can rest assured there'll be something in there that tells you that Mary Lou was eating puppies and was seen eating puppies at the weekend.
The model of journalism at the moment, the way it has become, and for many, many journalists, it's precarious work. And for those who have tenure, it's low-paid tenure. And it's still precarious enough for them. Under that model, it's hard to be brave.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a very, very tough job now. Journalism. It's a really, really tough job. And like I've had people that come to me and say, would you advise my son, my daughter, like, to go into journalism? And I say no.
We had Michael Cogley, who's a young journalist making his way in the Times Ireland edition here on Friday, and I felt like giving him a hug and saying, well, best of luck going into this world, and it really, really knows what he wants to do. Went into it on that basis, Yeah.
Unless you've got control yourself of, that if you set up your own newspaper, your own online news, something like that.
Your own podcast.
But if you're, but like, just to give an example of that, like this week, I think it's pretty significant, that, like, in that finance committee, meeting, we had commitments from Paul Murphy, Solidarity, People for Profit, from John Collins, who's with the Independence for Change. We know Catherine Murphy is on our side in this. We had a commitment from Sinn Féin, commitment from Fianna Fáil, which is basically more than half the door. Like, yes. They will chase down this, setting up a cross-party committee to take on the ECB, to challenge the ECB on this thing. And that's, I think that's significant. And there isn't a line anywhere. There was, on the RT online news, there was a statement, an article, but that's the RT online news. On the mainstream media, the RT main news, either radio or television, on any of the programs, on any newspaper, just not.
And you would think in the silly season, when you have a real story, where you have that consensus of opinion, and I'm quite sure there are many Fine Gael backbenchers out there who would love to be looking at 4 million extra in the budget for this, billion extra in the budget for this term. I'm sure they'd love to be. That's guaranteed re-election if you had that there. Everybody gets a little touch of something and you get elected again. So not being on board is working against your own best interests on this, when all it takes is cross-party consensus, little group go out to the EU and sit together and say, look, let's sort this out.
And let's be honest, you're not gonna win it's not going to be 4 billion, okay? I'm not telling you. I'm going to tell you.
Even if it was 2.
No, but I don't care if it's 2 or not. I'm saying, first of all, the Irish people would like to stand up, please. We'd like to stand up, please. We'd like to see that someone true. Sometimes you have to hit a bully, even if you're gonna lose. Sometimes you have to show that you actually that you weren't walked on. We do have a certain level of, we did take it. We did take it for a decade, but we really, people are more conscious now, and people are more woke, and we've a younger generation of people who are pissed off being called the locked-out generation, and they're rightly so.
Well, the legacy that my generation is leaving, like, not even to your generation, Tony, but the one after that again. I mean, it's shameful, and like, and through this thing, this really gets me. It really, really gets me. Like, through this, we've had people, and eventually we talk about, how we could have been Greece, what happened to us could have happened, if we challenged them, they might have crushed it, they might have done this, that, or the other. And people don't factor in, when they're speaking about that, the value of freedom and independence. They don't, the guys who went into the GPO in 1916 and did what they did, the risk that they took, just to win that freedom and independence. Because to them, that was everything. Freedom and independence is everything that, and you can be as poor as you like, but, if you're free and independent, as opposed to being downtrodden and abused, which is what has happened to us over the last 10 years. And that there was nobody here with the courage at the top political level to stand up and say, stop. Hold on. We're not taking this. We're just, and whatever the risk is, with Europe or with the EU, with the Eurozone, we're not taking this. We are not doing this. We are not going to, you cannot treat the Irish people like this. Well, as if we're vassals or servants of
the overriding memory for me of the Kenny tenureship of the country was Sarkozy ruffling his hair in the EU.
Tickling his chin.
And
that photograph.
But that photograph, it sums up what happened with Ireland. And it sums it up. They played the good boy, not for the good of the country, but for the good of themselves. And we know politicians are largely drives them is self-achievement. They're not care about you, me.
That's
not
true.
all of them. You see, this is a problem again. I have not. I'm sorry, but there are a lot of really well motivated politicians out there, and we've worked with lots of them, and in a lot of different parties as well. It doesn't just come down to political philosophy. There are lots of them that are well motivated and they believe what they believe philosophically, politically. But this was just cowardice. This was nothing else but cowardice by the people at the top, that they just took this lying down. They did not fight this at all, and they should. Absolutely should have.
The cowardice came from when Fianna Fáil sent Lenihan off to Europe on his own, and he had no backup man, no wingman. The rest of Fianna Fáil hid under a table and let him go over and face the music, and that was a despicable thing to do. That was a despicable thing to do.
They knew that man was sick.
Yeah, it was despicable, Tony. It was a despicable thing to do.
That's the thing. I wouldn't exonerate Fianna Fáil either when it comes to this. There was they should have. I don't care. People, you have to stand and fight. Yes. You do have to make a stand and fight. And as Tony said, and he's spot on. Because we've all done it, I'm sure. If you face down a bully, all right, sometimes you will take a beating, but they too will be reluctant to come back and tangle with you again.
Yeah, you don't make yourself an easy target.
Yeah. That's my point entirely. That's what's the Martin. Whether you got to come away with the 4 billion or not, I don't care. I want to know that you stood up and you took a swing and you said, "Don't come back again. Go find someone. Go find someone who won't stand up for himself." We're looking at this, and we got to put this again in the context of Brexit coming down the tracks as well. Because if we do have another economic shock, whether it's Brexit based or a property collapse,
when we do,
yes, absolutely, when, because we actually talk and people, we have economists talking about. Our Minister for Finance is talking about a rainy day fund for the next recession, the next shock, and you're just thinking, why not build an inclusive and sustainable economy instead of looking forward to the next shock?
But if we do bring it back to let's bring it back to what's in people's pockets and what's coming out of people's pockets. There's 4 billion a year being taken out of citizens' pockets and basically put in a furnace and burned. So how do we get this beyond where we are now, Dermot? How do we?
Well, this is, I suppose, where we came in. The actual nuts and bolts of it are complicated, but the morality of it, and we think the legality of it, is not complicated. So I think that and I said this on the committee, and I use a lot of sporting analogies, I'm afraid. Actually, when we have finished this broadcast, I'm hoping to turn on my laptop and find the Corker after beating Clare on the Munster hurling final. It's the first time I've ever missed it. But this is far more important. But I used the sporting analogy, and I said, what you've got to do is put a team together, but they've got to be your best team. They can't approach this in half-ass fashion and put guys in there who they're basically just putting in the numbers in the team. They've got to pick really, really clued in people.
Smart people.
They've got to prepare properly. There's a huge amount of background that needs to be investigated here. And they need to get some really, really top-class legal eagles involved in this here. And then when you have all your ducks in a row, you go to the ECB, you go to the Council, and if necessary, if you get no satisfaction there, you go to the European Court of Justice. But you fight this thing. And unlike you, Tony, I do want to see money come back.
I don't want to see
no,
it.
but I think that is important to me as well. I mean, it's important that we fight. Jeez, it's important that we fight. But I think it's important as well that we win something, because like this, if we don't, then it is an injustice. There is absolutely no doubt whatsoever about it. And if we don't get something back from this, like I don't expect that we're going to get back 69.7 billion euro. I don't expect we're even going to get back maybe the 35 billion euro that went into Anglo, although we should get that back. But like, fight. At least make your case, go up, stand up, make your case, and take the feed.
Can I remind you of the phrase that used to be bandied about that was murdered a few years ago? Retrospective recapitalisation.
Yeah.
Do you remember? We were told we were a special case and we'd receive retrospective recapitalisation. If you take forensic accountants, forensic auditors, forensic solicitors, and you put together a case, and you can't find the bones of a case to put to the European Court of Justice, you're not actually paying attention to what happened in the history, because it's right there in the papers and the headlines. There's a bones of an injustice, as you say quite rightly there.
Well, we have the capability.
People exist. We're more than capable. I mean, like people talk about the capacity of the Irish civil service, and there really are some brilliant people in there, in the Irish civil service and in politics as well. I mean, they do get a hard rap. And I tell you something, like having worked with Luke outside there, and I had no idea what I actually escaped in that thing, because the hours that they all put in. I mean, I'd say in fairness to them, like that, now maybe they're hours, I think, especially when local politicians here are concerned on the wrong things. But they work enormously hard, but you can get good ones. There are smart, sharp, intelligent people there that you get and put on this team, but like, I'm talking about renegotiation. I'm not talking about the guys that like Enda Kenny, God love him, and Michael Noonan saying, "Oh, we fought a battle and we got the interest rate reduced on the debt that we were paying to the EU."
Can I come in? Yes, can I come in? That's important. It has to be always put back that we didn't get the interest rate reduction. We got what was given to the other people.
And the other thing as well was that that this famous June Declaration, on Ireland and the separation of the sovereign and now I'm told from inside, because there was nothing that came out. That was a council meeting, but I'm told, like the film said, that Kenny made very little contribution to that. But what he actually then got written into it, that little statement at the end, like that, it was worthless, because what they said was that they will examine the situation with a view to ascertaining the situation or whatever it was. Those was meaningless waffle words. There was no, but it was presented back here and again the media come into this thing, as a major victory by Kenny, out of this meeting. That meeting was dominated by Italy and Spain, because they were the ones saying, no. Do you
recall there was the first time Spain breached the EU debt to GDP ratio rules? Do you remember that?
No, but they've all been.
No, but you remember when they did it, and the EU said we have to fine you.
Yeah, that's
right. And the EU sent them a fine, and they sent them back, and in Spanish they told them fuck off.
Yeah, PFO.
Yeah, and they did, and the EU said, well, can we say to you, just because of what you've gone through and all of that, we're going to let you off, and Spain said, no. Fuck off again.
Sometimes it just takes the sand, the nuts, whatever you want to call it, to stand up.
Look at Hungary right now. Look at Poland. Look at Austria. What they're saying to the EU.
Yeah, and these are human rights issues.
Yes.
And
what they're saying, they're basically saying, piss off. No, we're not, So, I know
for better and worse.
No, for better and worse. But I know you had Luke in here a few weeks ago, but we're out there and we're watching what's happening, and it's not being reported back here. But there's a real drive in Europe now towards the United States of Europe, in which there will be not just the central banking and and the ECB isn't the proper central bank anyway, but there will be a European army, and there is a drive for that, because you watch Manfred Weber, who is the head of the European Parliament, the EPP. You listen to Guy Verhofstadt, and you listen to the S&D guys, and I'm telling you, they are driving towards this full European Union. And I think in one way, they're very happy that the UK are gone, because the UK would have been our staunchest ally in fighting all of this. And that I think that in one sense they're happy that the UK are gone.
Oh, I kind of agree with you.
Because now they can drive on, and the only thing like is just little Ireland down here shouting, but we're not even shouting, because this whole thing with Brexit at the moment, and I believe this, that there's a quick quote pro that where they're saying, "Oh, we've got your back in the war."
Yeah.
But now, like, what you've got to do is you've got to show solidarity with all of us, like, and you've got to go full tilt for this, European army and this European defence.
I completely agree with you.
And
There's a quid pro
it's
quo
going,
in there.
there is a quid pro quo, and it's
Can-
not written about or spoken about, but I'm telling you.
There was an interesting development this week again, and I know we're going to bring this to a close, but you talked about Brexit, you talk about the federal EU, which is definitely in the agenda. There's no question. It's particularly in Germany and France see a federal, the United States of Europe, or whatever term you want to call it. But it was an interesting thing whereas Leo, as we know, the rhetoric has been ramping up. He's talking tough about Brexit, which he's right to do in terms of his own political going for election. Dermot, the man.
Okay. Yeah, but I'm saying from the national interest point of view, Tony, I completely disagree, because, like, the worst the deal that the UK, like, we're going to be the worst affected. So the worse the deal the UK gets, the worse will be affected. From the beginning, they should have been in the UK's corner. In the UK's
well, we did think at the beginning that we were quietly in the UK's corner, but now we've seen it's become more entrenched and more polarised, and he's speaking out. But there was an interesting point where I saw that there was a few attacks on Leo this week, and there was an interesting one where someone said, reality is the Republic of Ireland likes to divert attention from its role as the EU tool. If the Republic of Ireland had its national interests at heart, it would be urging the UK-EU trade deal instead of backing the EU's belligerence. Okay, that's to your point. The reply came from my own local TD, Noel Rock, which was very interesting, Martin, because what he said is, nobody's diverting. We recognise the EU was founded on 4 freedoms: goods, services, capital and labour. Anyone outside the Union can't choose a la carte the freedoms they like the look of. Here's what I'm going to say to that. Noel is spot on, but that's where we're wrong, because he's identified perfectly that the EU is all about goods, services, capital. Where is the human rights issue? Where is the care for the citizens? Where is the actual people? Because Europe is made up of people. It's not made up of corporations and banks and financial and accounting services. That's where the crux is. That's where the rotten state is in the heart of Europe. That they've lost their way. And I always repeat it, when they did the Future of Europe white paper.
Yes.
Not one scenario had anything about a human rights issue. Nothing. It was all about PESCO.
Every scenario had PESCO. Every single scenario.
So I think, and I'm going to come back to right at the beginning and disagree with you. You have done a lot, because you've marched when it was raining and you marched and you're still marching. You're still on the campaign trail. You're still banging the drum. Yeah, look, we're advocates. Do we think these things can be changed? Yes, absolutely. I'm an awful optimist there. So that's just.
Well, no, I mean, we talked about the July Accord, or whatever we want, or the June Accord. Yeah. We're now in July. There's simply nothing stopping, by the end of July, a cross-party team being together. There's nothing stopping it. Mm-hmm. All the steps are there. All it takes is a bit of willpower on the side of those who are interested in doing it. That's all it takes.
We'll be pushing it. And she couldn't be there. Fiona Fitzpatrick was the one who did a lot of the work. Yes. But like, I can guarantee she's on holidays with her family at the moment, which is why she couldn't be there. And like, the sacrifices that a lot of families, in fairness, had made over the years, like, this would have been a bridge too far on it, but she will be working that, as will I, as will others. Like,
Fiona has been absolutely tireless all along. I've been in contact with Fiona many
still,
times.
like, for somebody like myself who was brought up on getting stuff done, working and getting stuff done, like, until we've actually done it, you haven't achieved anything. And like, we can't. I know people have often said to us, and I use this often as well, like, what do you hope to achieve? And we've said from the beginning, we don't hope to achieve anything. We've never based this on hope. It's just determination. Because hope is an emotion that goes up and goes down.
Yes.
It's the hope that kills you.
It is the hope. But like, this is just determination. And like, if you knew the group, we were marching again this morning, like maybe 15, 20 of us like that this morning, but even after the week we've had. But like, the determination that's in the group, that this is going to be done.
Well, I'm convinced that at some stage you're going to be on Irish mainstream, and they're going to say, Dermot, you've achieved this, you're an overnight success. I think that's inevitable that will come, and you will be able to.
Best newcomer.
Because you've been at this for an incredibly long time, and it takes incredible determination to stay going. Mm-hmm. It does. And I know people who've gone down and marched with you year in, year out, all types of weather. And I know that we had, Rathote says no as well.
They were brilliant out there.
Brilliant.
When we were playing, when I was still with the examiner and covering matches here, like on the Sunday morning, that gave me, I could leave the Ballyhale and come up and do that match out there. But God, some mornings out there with Linda and
Linda's just a force.
But like they might have 8 or 9 people. Mm. No, I mean in Ballyhale is just a rural parish, like so you're up and down the road there, and there are people going to mass, like you know there might be comments and things, but like what they were doing down there with 8, like at least we used to have like 20 to 100, different weeks. So we would strengthen numbers, like I say, but like. They were up there, and by God, they'd still go out and they'd do their march up, and down and take the cat calls and take whatever.
Oh yeah, and Linda took an awful lot of abuse because of what they were doing. An awful lot.
But you're right, she's a like herself. Fiona, like the forces of nature, like is
So we've actually settled on it. We all need to get out of the way and let the women take over. Let's tell the truth.
But well, again, and like this is another thing, like on the belly, like again. I hate genderization.
Yeah, well.
I do. I mean, I just absolutely hate it because, like, I grew up in a house of, four sisters, 6 brothers, But, like, to me, it's just about equality. End of story. Like, and it's just, we're people, that's it. But, like, this business, about how many women, how many men, like, whoever happens to be there is there, But to me, like, I hate the whole genderization business. I just want for equality. That's it. Just equality.
Yeah, right across the board.
Regardless of gender, race, colour, creed, origin, just equality.
Everybody the same.
Everybody, we're not all the same, but we're all equal.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming in with us. This has been a really good interview, and one that really needed to be done because it's not anywhere else. Mm-hmm. And really thank you for coming to us and talking to us. Greatly appreciate it. No, you do, Tony. You're ecstatic.
This is my man. We'll be in the Autobahn in a couple of Sundays time. So if you see us, don't come over. We don't like people. Don't disturb us. Listen, folks. Thanks for listening. Hit subscribe. Tell your friends. We need you to share this with your friends because that's the only way that this grows. We have no marketing budget. We rely on you guys. Talk to you all soon. Take care. Bye bye.